Chris Hadfield changed the way we look at the world, literally. These photos are beautiful, and millions of people around the world have been able to step back and look at how beautiful the world is. And I do want to talk about that, but I also want to talk about the beauty that you talk about in your book, An Astronaut's Guide to Life, because the book is about your journey to space, but it's really about a journey that even people who aren't astronauts can relate to. And I found so many profound, simple truths in this book that had nothing to do with space. So if you haven't read the book yet and you're wondering why I'm not asking him specific space questions yet, I will get to that. And do you mind if I read a quick little passage from here? Sure. The fact is that even on the least eventful day in space is the stuff of dreams. In some ways, of course, it's the improbability of being there at all that makes the experience so transcendent. But fundamentally, life off Earth is in two important respects not at all unworldly. You can choose to focus on the surprises and pleasures or the frustrations. You can choose to appreciate the smallest scraps of experience, the everyday moments, or to value only the grandest, most stirring ones. Ultimately, the real question is whether you want to be happy. That's beautiful. And I think that that has a lot about what you were talking about in this book and what you want to say in this book.
The opportunity to fly in space is a privilege almost unlike any in human history. The complex process by which you might be chosen to go do it is extremely improbable and rigorous. And then even when you are chosen as an astronaut, it's again as complex and unlikely and rigorous to get to fly in space. And so the rareness of the experience could really color how you think about it. And it could color how you perceive what you're doing up there, but then also what it means to you as a person. And we don't fly in space just to look out the window. We are busy up there, and we are just trying to stay alive some of the times, but most of it you're there with an extreme complex purpose that has taken years of preparation and therefore does not go right. Nothing on a space flight goes as planned. It's always one great struggle of accomplishment versus time with a great frantic nature to it. But at the same time, you are living in a place that is just inherently magic, where you are flying weightless, which is a joy that you can't do anywhere else. And every time you look out the window, the whole world is pouring by next to you. And so somehow, in your mind, you have to both appreciate and rationalize what's going on. The import of the work you're doing, but the magic of where you are and what you're seeing. And then when you come home, how do you integrate that into the rest of your life? Do you then view the rest of everything as a disappointment or a denouement or a poor gray comparison of the richness of the colors that you've seen, or not? And that's a personal choice. And when I set out to write the book, I wanted to talk about the beauty and the wonder of the experience, but not just for that, but for whatever useful lessons may come from it, because it's an astronaut's guide to life on Earth, and that's what really matters. And so being able to see those wondrous things, but be able to fold them back into yourself so that, if anything, they just make you a little more capable and a little more appreciative, that is really important to me, and that's why I put it in the book.
And knowing that people will pick up this book because they want to know more about your experience. You touched so many people with your journey, but that they will get something else out of it that they may not expect. I have to admit, reading the book, I assumed, and I did, learn a lot about your space journey. But every page that I folded down, and almost every second page was about life here on Earth. I was reading things that were making me go, I hadn't thought of it that way, and what a beautiful way to look at life here on Earth. And what does it mean to you to know that people are going to take away more than just your space journey?
As an astronaut, we're asked to speak on a regular basis. It's part of the job, outreach, right? I spoke, because there are so few Canadian astronauts, I spoke, thousands of times over the last 20 years. And what I learned over that time was, first you have to get people's attention. They have to hear you speaking in order to hear any content. And to get people's attention, of course, if I talk about the incredible experiences that, it's so rare. It's like me listening to someone talk about, discovering insulin or climbing Everest, something really unusual. The message is important. But once you have the student's attention, then it's the content that matters. Then it is what they take away from it that is really important. And so over those 20 years, I really learned not only how to tell or what stories were inherently interesting, but also how important it was to try and draw something useful out of them, so that when a student came away from a presentation, they would go, hey, that was a really cool story about launch, and I never really thought about that. And so the book was the coalescence, was really the grandchild of all of those talks I've given over the years. And I'm delighted that you have so many pages marked in there, and not just about what it was like to launch.
I want all of my students to read this book, because what you talk about is, the teamwork, that the expression that you use, which I love, I hadn't heard this before, is that you aim to be a zero. Yeah. And if you could explain that a little bit to our audience, because that was one of those pivotal moments, is that, wow, that is exactly what when you want to succeed at something, aiming to be a zero is one of the ways to do it.
Yeah, in order to succeed in spaceflight, there's a lot of counterintuitive things. We don't visualize success, we visualize failure. We climb up and down the ladder of success all the time, and we don't view the climb down as a decrease in who you are. Also, when you come into a new situation, it's very tempting to think that you know what's going on, and to have the basis of whatever you've learned in your life sort of direct you to be the savior of what's going on. You think, hey, I know what's going on here. I've seen 3 symptoms, therefore I'm taking action and giving direction. And you think you're a big +1 coming in. You're a positive. But in fact, you haven't really noticed what's going on. That place existed before you got there, and they probably had a good way to cope before you showed up. And you come in thinking you're a +1, and you are almost invariably a -1. You're a negative. You are making things worse by blundering around like an elephant stepping on the flowers when you think you're being productive. And if time is really short and you have to come in and take action, someone's having a heart attack, there's a building on fire, you need to come in and take action and hope you're doing the right thing. But almost, very seldom is the building on fire. Most of the time, you have a little time to come in and actually notice, spend some time. And the way I tried to phrase that was aim to be a zero at first. Aim to not ripple what's happening. Get there long enough that you're a neutral, that you're contributing, but you're not negating, until you really truly understand the subtlety of what's going on around you, and then selectively know for sure that you can do things to turn yourself into a +1. Otherwise, you're going to think you're a +1, and everybody around you will know absolutely for sure that you're a -1.
Well, I love the story you had about the astronaut, and I love the fact that you didn't name who this astronaut was, but who walked into an elevator and stood there and got angry. You expect me to push this button? Yeah. And that is such a perfect analogy for how a team works, no matter where you are on the rank. And there are so many fabulous stories in here about you as commander. Being there, your job is to support someone else's glory. And that can be hard, especially for people who are as driven as most astronauts are.
Something I learned a long time ago is you do not need to push someone else down in order for you to get up. And in fact, if you're part of a team, if you can build increased capability and skills within the people around you and promote them and show that person not only has some skills that you don't, but actively rise them up with those skills, then it raises the whole team. And for a while, it helps you out indirectly, because that person is shouldering the burden, is doing something you don't have to be doing. It is not necessary to make other people look small to make yourself look big. And as a leader of a small team, it's even more vital to make sure that the recognition and the celebration of everybody's small successes and everybody's individual skills and victories is shared and brought to the fore, because then a rising tide with all ships, every single person will understand what they're doing in the team better, they'll feel better about the mutual shared success, and as a group of people, you'll inherently be more capable.
You can see now why I want my students to read this book. And in your case, it's going to save lives. I mean, you talk about how you visualize the worst thing that could happen, because the worst thing that could happen from a tiny bit of detergent that's left on your visor that ends up blinding you on a spacewalk, and that changed the way the space travel changed their detergents that they use for the visor.
The anti-fog,
yeah. But one little microscopic drop of detergent blinded you, right. And you're blind on a spacewalk, and all of your training has to come in within seconds to determine how to deal with that. And if you have any moment of panic or doubt, again, people could die.
And that's one of the advantages of explaining it as an astronaut's guide to life on Earth, because our examples become so exaggerated. When I'm trying to understand something complex, I try and exaggerate it crazily in my mind so that the issues become more readily apparent. You know, blow it up to a huge example, and then I can see, oh, well, obviously I can pick my path through this. By its very nature, space travel does that inherently. It takes what might be a subtle thing. You know, if you're just wearing sunglasses and you get a little bit of oil or something in your sunglasses, gets in your eye, no big deal. If it gets in your eye when you're driving a car down the highway at 100 kilometers an hour, maybe another big deal. If it gets in your eye when you're outside on a spacewalk and you can't rub your eye and the tears don't drain and you're blinded in both your eyes, that's an exaggerated issue that shows you should never have that stuff on the visor of your goggles in front of you. And that small example applies to everything. We call it sweating the small stuff. You know, if you don't sweat the small stuff in an astronaut job, you die. But if you don't sweat the small stuff in normal life, then you're probably going to be at least inconvenienced, and at most it'll completely derail what you wanted to do because you didn't anticipate it enough time in advance to give yourself the chance to react properly, and you ended up getting cornered by not sweating the small stuff. And it's not that you need to run around fearfully, constantly sweating the small stuff. The thing is to recognize that you always have some time in advance of things happening, always. And how do you prepare yourself for the most likely thing to happen? Those are the small things you need to be sweating so that when the event happens, you go, geez, I wasn't expecting this to happen, but I thought about it 4 times and I practiced it twice, so I think I have a plan that might work. And so you end up with sort of a comfortable optimism rather than kind of a fearful hope that things don't go that way.
And as you used the word counterintuitive before, and it is counterintuitive to the self-help books that are out there, right? You know, don't sweat the small stuff, envision glory, and it will happen. And your message is the exact opposite. And as I said, so many things in the book clicked for me, especially in teaching broadcast journalism. You know, a team putting a newscast together, the smallest little thing can snowball to disastrous effect.
Yeah, it sure can. And in 2003, we had watched small bits of foam come off space shuttles for decades. And in 2003, we saw a larger than average piece of foam come off and hit the left wing of Columbia. And we didn't sweat the small stuff seriously enough. We sure didn't visualize disaster. We visualized success. We said, well, we've seen foam come off before, and we think we're probably okay, and the shuttle's tough and rugged. And we didn't even go look to see what damage was done to that wing because it was going to be hard. We were going to have to do a spacewalk to do it. But we didn't do it. And we condemned that crew to death because we sent them back into the atmosphere with a hole in the wing that because we didn't actually work the problem well enough in advance, the vehicle's wing was blast furnace off and melted off and killed the crew on board. It's a horrible way to learn the lesson. But sometimes you need an egregious example to remind yourself that you're not paying attention to the things that really matter. In my business, it's so dramatically exaggerated that it becomes mantra. There's no other way to live. But when you take that mantra and you think about, how does that apply to regular life, there's a lot of worthwhile stuff. And since people spent the last 21 years teaching me those things and hammering them into me and trying to show me the advantages of them, and then them being proven by the success of the space flights that we do, I just thought it was worthwhile to try and get it all down on paper and maybe see if someone else could pick something useful out of it.
There's so much useful information here, even just talking about your journey to become an astronaut, how every step of the way, because of course there was never a guarantee you were going to get into space. So you had to enjoy every step of the way. You couldn't just be taking all these courses, taking the time away from your family with this one goal, because if it doesn't happen, it would feel like a waste. So you were able to turn everything into a joyous learning experience. And again, another lesson I hope people take away from this book is that the journey is the most important thing. And now that your time in space is over, your journey's still continuing. Yeah. And I know that you mentioned in the book that you do get tired of people saying, so what now that it's over? And it's not over.
When I first set out to be an astronaut, I wanted to walk on the moon. That's what Neil and Buzz did. That's what astronauts did. And I said, I want to walk on the moon. I still haven't walked on the moon, but I don't consider myself a failure. You know, that wasn't the measure of success. If you set out to say, I want to be the anchor of whatever, the NBC Nightly News or the National or something, I want to be the anchor of that. That's why I'm getting into journalism. If you decided that everything you did in your life was a failure until you cross that particular threshold, you're setting yourself up for misery. Probably by the time you get to that age, that program won't even be on anymore, much like walking on the moon. But if you are truly excited about the thought of getting into that business, then each of the steps that you nudge your life along towards it will be a step in the direction that suits you anyway. And you're going to get to various levels and opportunities for experience in there that you're going to be happy at and you're going to enjoy and find reward in. And you'll probably get to some other destination in it that may even surpass what you originally thought, or at least be in parallel to it. The key is not to measure your life's worth by one particular threshold of value, but instead to look at every single day and every single step and go, man, I love this field that I'm working in, and today I got to do these things, and I got to solve these problems, and you know, maybe someday still I will be, I don't know, Tom Brokaw or Knowlton Nash or something, but meanwhile, this suits me, and I'm having a great time, and that's what guided and rewarded me so far.
And I love learning all of this in the book. And again, some of it is things that I just needed reaffirming, you know, to hear. But some of it was real light bulb moments. But being an astronaut, of course, is also, and a lot of people don't realize this. I understood that you were doing something important up there, but reading about the tests and the experiments that you guys do up there is incredible. And I think that's something important for our viewers to fully understand the importance of the research that goes on up there.
Space Station serves a lot of different purposes, but its fundamental core purpose is a laboratory for the world that has no gravity, or virtually no gravity. We can't do that on the surface of the Earth. If you want to do an experiment and you want to see how things actually behave where you remove one great variable, in this case gravity, if you want to see how flame works where the heat doesn't rise, if you want to see how nanoparticles behave where they don't settle to the bottom, you can't do it anywhere but on the space station. And we have about 200 experiments going simultaneously on the human body. When you take away gravity, osteoporosis is rapidly accelerated, artery hardening, changes in the heart. A lot of really interesting things happen to the body. So it's a great laboratory for studying human physiology. Looking at the universe, we're trying to understand what the universe is made of, collecting subatomic particles to try and understand what dark energy and dark matter are, and looking at the world to see changes in the atmosphere, to look at the effects of both natural and human change in climate, to really truly understand the problems. Space Station is a wonderful platform for all of that. And it's also a pretty good place to learn other lessons and maybe to extend the human understanding of our own planet and our place in it.
And that human understanding, that human element in your book is so important. I love the connection between the astronauts, the entire team, and how you guys care about each other. I mean, a lot of very tender moments, and the music. Stan Rogers, Gordon Lightfoot, the music that you chose to share is, I mean, it allowed people to really connect with you guys.
We work long hours on the space station. Naturally, we are the laboratory technicians and the lab rats simultaneously. But we do get together for dinner a few times a week, and specifically for any of the celebrations, birthdays, holidays, people back on Earth. And when we were together, the crew, each of the people, would make a point of talking about how this day was special for them back on Earth, what was going on with their family back on Earth. And we would pass the guitar around. And lots of people play a little bit of guitar. And we would sing songs. You know, we had Russians on board, and Belarusians, and Americans and Canadians. And everyone's got different histories and different ideas and different culture. And to be able to share it both at the storytelling level, but also at the music level, really enriched, but also helped clarify the experience to each of us. And we're not robots up there. We're not just some sort of temperature probe up there looking what space is like. This is an extension of humanity off of our planet. We've been up there continuously for the last 13 years. It's kind of a new perspective for us. And to be able to play classical or historic or cultural music up there, as well as write new music up there, is just furthering that extension of our understanding of what we're doing.
There's so much I want to talk to you about, but it is all in the book. So for viewers who are frustrated that I'm not asking the question you want to hear the answer to, it is all in the book. So I want to wrap things up with what really struck me, thinking of yourself as that child who thought one day I'd like to walk on the moon. Now that you have done this entire journey from test pilot, to commander, to the ISS, what would that little kid be saying? Would he even be able to fathom what you've done and what you've been through?
It was that little 9-year-old boy. I assume the 9-year-old girl is within you right now, but he has his hand up my back and he's directing a lot of the things that I do. I'm like a marionette to some degree for the boy that I was at 9 and 10 years old. A lot of the values that my parents gave me and the values that we naturally absorb as Canadians growing up, the expectations of what normal is and what we might get out of life, those were pretty clearly set in my mind by 9 and 10 years old. But also the straight joy of living that a 9-year-old has, and the fun and the lack of fear to have a great time and to behave like a kid. I just, as an adult, I just kind of keep those under wraps. So I know my 9-year-old kid is having a great time. And the whole time I was on the space station, I was this serious commander with a haircut like this and a mustache. But I was that 9-year-old kid the whole time, just loving the experience and reveling in it and seeing it for exactly what it was. And so happy that I took that decision back when I was a kid.
Well, you've brought out that joy, that 9-year-old joy and wonder in millions of people around the world, and continue it with your book. So thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure. It's really nice to talk with you, and I'm glad you enjoyed the book.
Loved it.
Thank you.